DreAllDay.com.
You're now tuned into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there even when the success you've expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative. That is the go-getter energy that moves any one of us, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And then we put all this together into a series of frameworks, approaches, insights, strategies, and techniques all underneath the umbrella of one unifying philosophy that is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic is we are on part 4 of our now concluding mini-series on the case for homeschooling. Before we get into this, remind you, workonmygame.com, get on my email list, my text message number down below in the description, and Work on Your Game University. Having me as your direct coach. One way to do that is by being a member of the university. You can get a link to that by looking down in the description. It is workonyourgameuniversity.com. Picking up where we left off at, which is point number 10, again, of our what is going to be our 4-part mini-series on the case for homeschooling. Number 10, focus on real-world skills. So instead of the quote-unquote standardized education that a kid would get in school, where they are learning a bunch of stuff that, as I already explained, is completely useless in everyday life, when you are homeschooling, you can focus on real skills that will prepare your child for the real world. Most of the things that get taught in school that a kid is forced to learn are nonsense, useless materials, simply because the government mandates that these things be taught, and the school has no choice. The school and the teachers, by extension, have no choice but to do what the government tells them to do because they are employed by the government. The government pays them. So if you stop listening to what the government says, you'll lose your job. So teachers have no choice but to do what the government says, even if what the government is telling them to do is a bunch of bullshit. And this is what happens. This is why standardized education in America is trash, because the system is set up to be trash. I do not blame the teachers for this. So any of you who send your kid to school, you don't like what's happening at school, don't get mad at the teachers. The teachers are they're but a reflection of what the governmental system is doing. And the governmental system is paid for by you and your tax dollars. The problem is, despite the fact that you're paying for the system with your tax dollars, they still don't listen to you when you voice a concern. The only way you can really voice a concern is through your votes. And even in voting, sometimes you have to choose between a lesser of two evils. It's still not really going to solve the problem that you want to get solved. So the best way to fix this entire issue, ladies and gentlemen, is not to keep complaining about it or going to meetings or voting, because you have already seen, all of you have X number of years that you've been alive to know that this is not really going to solve the problem. All it does is maybe make it feel a little bit less painful for a temporary period of time, but doesn't actually solve it. If you like to solve your problem while you're still alive, folks, the option is to opt out of the system so that you stop being a victim of it. That's the option that you do have. It is available. Now, if you had the balls to take it is a different question. But is it available? Yes, it is. So back to my point. Focus on real world skills. Instead of the standardized education that a kid gets in school, where they are learning a bunch of stuff that is completely useless in everyday life or easily Googleable, which means they don't need to quote unquote learn it in school because it's right there on Google. There's no need for them to fill their head with this information just to prove that they remembered it on the test and then to forget it 3 years later. They don't even remember what they learned, quote unquote learned. Now you can focus on real world skills to get your child ready for some real stuff. Again, aside from core subjects I consider to be reading, writing, and arithmetic, but the government may mandate others. Homeschooling can allow a child to focus on subjects that they are more interested in, which usually means they'll be much more engaged in it, and they'll be much more prepared for applying those skills in the real world, whatever those skills happen to be. They'll be much more prepared. They'll be prepared sooner. They'll be better prepared, and they will be ahead of their school counterparts who are only getting the standardized amount of knowledge. And this all depends on a lot of other factors, including what you are doing outside of the school time and who you are as parents. All of those things play a role in, and also how your kid just takes the things, because every person has a different personality, including your children. So all of these things factor in, okay? The whole point is, if you want to have some control over this and you want to give your kids some real world skills, whatever you believe them to be, you have complete control when you're homeschooling your kid. Now, you send them to school, you lose control. You give up control. So your public school counterpart, the public school counterpart kids, they're only getting the standardized amount of knowledge and information on certain subjects, or they're getting no knowledge on certain subjects. Damn sure none that is specialized and custom fit to their interest level and or skill level. Now, yes, there are some schools that do give you some more specified training. So there are some schools where you can take a class to be an electrician, let's say in high school, but do all schools provide that? No. And does the system itself, is it designed to give you those options as a standard, just as a standard set of rules? The answer is hell no. Of course, we know that's not the case. But there are people who want to go into those spaces. They can't get the training in school. Why not? Because again, the system changes very slowly, if at all, and it changes very inefficiently, and it operates very ineffectively. This is just a good way to describe the government, period. Inefficient, ineffective, and slow. That's how things are. What you want to be is the opposite of that. Now, you want to be efficient, effective, and fast. So again, let me ask you a question. Why would, if you understand this and you agree with what I just said, why would you send your kid to a place that is operated inefficiently, ineffectively, and slowly? Why would you send your kid to that place? Now, I'm not saying there can't be diamond in the rough, great teachers involved in some school. Every school has a couple teachers who are great, amazing teachers who probably shouldn't be working in the education system. They probably should be running their own businesses. They have entrepreneurial minds instead of being stuck in that shitty system operating under the government mandate. They should be doing their own thing. I know a lot of teachers who fit that description, but they make their own decisions. Point being, the system is shit. And if you send your kids into a system that's shit and they come out with shit, then who's to blame? You are. You knew the situation before you sent them there, but you did it anyway. So who's to blame? You are. Period. If your kid wants to learn a customized skill, you got to teach it to them. Don't expect the school to do it. You teach it. And you can probably teach it better than the school can. I talked about this when I gave you the episode on why I'm going to be homeschooling my kid. There's not a teacher in the United States of America who could teach my kid the things I want my kid to know better than I can. Not one. I'm overqualified to teach it. I'm overqualified to teach entrepreneurship, personal development, professional development, logical thinking, objectivity, critical thinking, communication skills, public speaking. I'm overqualified to teach these things to my kid. There's not a teacher in the country who could teach it better than me. So if I send my kid to a school, I'm signing them up for a downgrade from me to whoever the teacher is. That's a downgrade, but that's just me. Now you got to decide how you want to do things and what you're qualified to do. Moving on. Point number 11. Topic here again today is the case for homeschooling. Point number 11. No standardized testing pressure. One of the biggest problems with public schools is that they have to send kids through a standardized testing process because this is the outdated way that schools gauge how much a kid is learning. Now, it may not be as emphasized these days as it used to be, but it still is there, and it's still a thing, and it's still ineffective and still inefficient, and the government is still doing it. Standardized testing. The problem with standardized testing is that you are testing people based on standards, certain standards that are based on people being a certain type of way. And everybody is not the same. So some people do really well on standardized tests because they are designed to do well on standardized tests and or they've been trained to do well on the test. And other people do horrible on the test, not because they are necessarily not as smart as the kids who did well, simply because they learn and apply things in a different way. Their brain works in a different way. And I want you all to understand the educational system in America is designed to create hourly employees. It's not designed to create entrepreneurs. This is why you hear many successful entrepreneurs, not all of them, but many successful entrepreneurs did not finish school and or were not very good at school. They were very average students. Why is this? Because they don't learn in standard ways. So the material didn't apply to them or excite them in the same way. So they didn't get as high grades and they go on to do their own thing, but school couldn't teach them to do. And that's when they become successful. And then when they need to hire some people, they go hire all the A students. All the A plus students who are getting the good grades in school are really good rule followers. So they're really good at operating at jobs. Is the reason why they get really good jobs. The best students get the best jobs. Average students go start their own businesses. I'm bringing all this up to say that if your kid is not standard, and most of you probably look at your kid and feel like they're not standard, if you're not standard, and your kid won't be standard if you're installing the right worldview. If you are not standard, your kid won't be standard if you're installing the right worldview. You hear me, parents? I said it twice for a reason. This applies both to the kids and to the teachers. In the public school system, teachers have to teach what they are told to teach, even if they don't want to teach it. Because passing the standardized test is how teachers keep their jobs. That's how schools stay open and they keep getting their funding. When you are homeschooling, you don't have this problem. You don't have to work within that world. Many public school teachers have to do this, what they call teaching to the test, so that kids will pass a standardized test. And again, it makes the school look good. School can stay open. Everybody can keep getting paid. And they keep getting their funding and the teachers keep their jobs. There's an entire system and cycle of nonsense that goes behind teaching to the test. And I'm not a fan of it. I'm just pointing out that it exists. The problem with standardized testing is that human beings are not standard. When you send your kids to public schools, they are being fitted for standard knowledge Now, I don't think anyone listening to this believes your child is a standard individual. So why are you sending your kids to a place where they are teaching them to be standard and average? Because that's what it is. That's what the school system is designed to do: create a bunch of standard, average, automaton robots who will do well in school, go to work and do the same thing they did in school. Sit down, shut up, wait for somebody to tell you what to do. That's what you do at work. Same thing you did in school. School is designed to get you ready for work. And if the work that you see the adults around you doing, if there are people who went to school and they got a degree, or they're touting this concept of you got to go to school and get a degree because it's going to help you be successful in life, look at the work that they're doing and then look at yourself and ask yourself, do you want to live that life? The answer is no, then you better start looking for alternatives. I'm talking to the kids here, really. But if you're a parent, if you think your kid thinks this way, you should help them out by showing them alternatives. The good news is, in the world that we live in today, there are plenty of alternatives available at your fingertips. Now, again, in 1997, maybe not so much. In 2025, absolutely. There are plenty of alternatives available. Parents, are you willing to put the effort into finding and providing those alternatives for your kids? Or are you going to just throw your hand in and send your kids to a public school and let them do whatever they're going to do with your kids? That's a question that you have to answer. Point number 12. Today's topic, once again, is the case for homeschooling. Number 12, choice over socialization. So one of the biggest challenges that I hear from parents when it comes to homeschooling, there's actually two of them. One of them is people saying, well, most parents are not qualified to homeschool their kids. Well, I don't give a damn what anybody says. I'm overqualified to homeschool my kid. On the subjects that I mentioned, I can out-teach any teacher in the country. I don't care what degree you got. Run them up against me. I can out-teach them. Just all you got to do is pull up my resume of all the episodes of this show on whatever subject I name and put it up against anything that a teacher can teach. I'm willing to stand on that. I don't have to say anything. Just use my archive. On the subjects that I mentioned, I can teach better than any teacher in the country, period. College professor, school teacher, elementary, whatever, don't matter. That's one argument, is that they say parents aren't qualified to teach. The other argument is, well, your kids won't be socialized properly because they won't get enough exposure to other kids. So I'm addressing that point right here. Your choice over socialization. One of the biggest challenges I hear from parents when it comes to homeschooling, this used to be a challenge that I had myself as well, was that a kid who's homeschooled is going to be awkward because they're not engaging with enough other people, right? Because they are not in school. But I've evolved my thinking on this. I touched on this earlier. I'm going to go deeper here. When you're homeschooling, you get to choose all the socialization your child does, and specifically with whom they socialize. So you have more say over your child's environment. I think that's better if you are an active and engaged parent than it is sending them to school and then getting the randomness of whatever else the other people's kids are learning and bringing with them to school, because they're giving some of it to your kid. Your kid's going to have some of that rub off on them. And again, I touched on this point earlier in the series, but this is half of the nature versus nurture debate. And I mean, the solution to the debate is that it's a combination of both your genetics and from whom you come, and it's your environment and with whom you engage that turns you into who you become. And how a person ends up who they are, the question is it more the genetics? Is it more the environmental influence? The answer is both. So if you believe that it is environmental influences and you believe that matters a lot, and you believe that the people who a person is around matters a lot to who they become. You understand the law of association. You become the average of the people you spend the most time with, or the people you are most influenced by, because you can spend time with people and not be really influenced by them. But the people who you are influenced by the most, if you believe all of that, then you probably want to have as much say and control over who your kid associates with as possible, because it's going to play a big role in who they become, right? Isn't that the whole point of parenting? So when you are homeschooling, you have 100% control, and with that, you get 100% responsibility over what's happening, who's doing what, who's engaging with what, and how they're engaging. And if you like that engagement, you can encourage more of it. If you don't like that engagement, you can get rid of it, but you have control. And with control comes responsibility. And the reason why many parents don't have as much control over their kids' upbringing as maybe they would like, if you ask them as they would like, the reason they don't have as much control is because many parents have abdicated responsibility. You see, when you abdicate responsibility, you also lose control in the process. You can't have one and not have the other. So the question again, I'll ask the same question for the last time in this series to all the parents out there: who's raising your kids? Let's recap today's class. So again, part 4 of our 4-part mini-series, The Case for Homeschooling. Point number 4, focus on real-world skills. So instead of the standardized education that a kid would get in school, where they're learning a bunch of stuff that they are not going to use in real life, now they get a more customized education that is based on who they actually are and what they're interested in. Number 11, no standardized testing pressure. kids are not standard. People are not standard. So sending people through a standardized system, conveyor belt like system, is a bad idea if you don't believe a person to be standard. And number 12, choice over socialization. All right, you want to make sure your kid is socialized and they're getting around other kids. Best thing you can do is get them around the kids you want them to be around, how you want them to be around them, and where and how often you want them around. You have full control with that when you're homeschooling your kid. You give up control with that when you send them to school, because you have no control over who those other kids are, what those other kids are learning, and what they're bringing to school to teach to your kid for 8 hours a day, which is more time than they are spending with you, which means they're going to be taught and raised more by them than they are by you. And you need to think about what that means and if you're okay with it. All that said, everybody, workonmygame.com, get on my email list. My text message number down below in the description. Have me as your direct coach, personal coach at workonyourgameuniversity.com. Work on your game. Dre, all